Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do my August wrap up. It's all the books that I read in August, and honestly I read a lot more than I thought I was going to read. I ended up reading 12 books, or at least reading and finishing 12 books. I did start more books than that, but I just haven't finished them. And yeah, let's just get into it because I want to talk to you about them. Alright, I'm going to do it in the order that I least to favorite. Just think that makes a little bit of sense. And I'm going to probably spend a little bit less time on the ones that I didn't particularly like unless I have something to talk about. I did, for the most part, read all of these books in vlogs, so if you watched any of my vlogs you probably saw my opinions on them anyway, so I won't try to go into too much detail with everything, but I will give you like a little bit of a rundown of like my feelings and what it's about if I have something particular to say. So the first one I actually gave a 1 star, so I would just generally just skip this book altogether, which is The Secret Life of an Uncool Mom by Serena Terry. Absolutely atrocious. There is no story. The main character is the dumbest person really to follow. I just have nothing good to say about this book. I honestly would give it 0 stars, but I gave it a 1 star because it's a book. It was published. It's here. Okay, next up, this is controversial because I haven't really seen that many people, at least on YouTube, talk negatively about this book, and I have rated Yellowface pretty low. I gave it a 2.5. I tabbed it really only slightly. I did talk about this in my vlog where I'm trying to find a 5-star read, and I think the main thing that I felt was lacking in this book was just a little bit extra. Like, there was so much hype about this book. I wanted it to be good. I generally thought I was going to give it at least a 4-star, and when I ended up reading it, and I read it super fast, which most people do, I've seen the majority of people read it really fast. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it's just the way it's written. It's just, there's nothing to it. I just wanted something else. I wanted something with a little bit more grittiness, a little bit more, I don't know, intelligence to it in a way. I don't want to say negative things about the book because the book as itself is a book that you can read. There's nothing wrong with it in that respect, but it's just not special enough. And with the hype that it gained and everyone saying it's an amazing book or it's a 4 or 5-star book, I just completely disagree. I just don't think there's anything special about this book. I think it had a lot of promise, and I think the what it was trying to do was really smart. I just don't think it was executed in the way that I was hoping it would be. I just don't think it was good enough. I want to preface by saying that also the ratings I give these books, it's not all on maybe the fact that they're written amazingly well or the story is super original. It's more my enjoyment of reading them and my overall experience as well. So I would say Yellowface is probably written better than some of the other books that I've rated slightly higher, but my enjoyment of them was greater than reading Yellowface. Okay, next up I've got Magpie by Elizabeth Day. Now I went into this really enjoying it. I started tabbing it and I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. I really enjoyed the first half of the book, and then I feel like the last part of the book just really let it down. That didn't really go anywhere, or where it went was not the same suspense that the rest of the book had, like the beginning of the book and the middle of the book and the build-up. There was a lot of eeriness, you know, the tension, and you're like, oh, what the hell, what's going on, or oh no, I mean, you know, you're kind of like anticipating the worst, and then what happens, I want to say right after the middle part, like the rest of the book is just like wah wah, you know, and I was very disappointed. I'm not going to talk about it because I will give away spoilers, but I enjoyed the book. I gave it a 3-star. I was really hoping, and I thought I was going to give it a much higher rating, but because of the ending, or not even so much the ending, the last third of the book let me down completely. I had to give it the rating that I've given it. I will read more from Elizabeth Day. I do like the way that she wrote the book, and I just wish that she had executed, like I wish she had taken a risk with the ending of this book and maybe not gone the direction that she went through. I will say also, trigger warning for this book, if you have anything that is traumatizing when it comes to infertility, or, you know, trying to, you know, have a baby or anything like that, I will say that there are some parts in this book that are hard to read, and for me personally it was you know, I didn't have a trigger warning for myself, so I was like, oh wow. There were parts in the book that definitely took me out of the book and into my own experiences of what I've gone through before in the past, and that was quite, you know, moving in a way. But yeah, just trigger warning if you've gone through anything of that nature. Okay, next up we've got A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. This is by Sarah Hawley. I found this book to be very easy to read, and I did enjoy it, but I really hoped that it was better, and I ended up giving it a 3-star. I was really enjoying it up until a point, and then I felt like nothing really progressed. I think everything you had like at the first third of the book was kind of similar to the rest of the book, if that makes sense. Like it was basically insta love, and I wish that there had been more tension, more build up between the two characters before they kind of ended up realizing that they just adore each other and blah blah blah. I wanted more of that tension, because I feel like you lost me at some point when, you know, you already knew that they loved each other, and then it's like you got half of the book left, and you're like, oh, it's not much is going on. So I felt like that let it down, the pacing, definitely. I think overall it was fine. There's a little bit of smut in here, so I don't know if you like that, then, you know, I think it does cross over a little bit into that, but not too much. But I was like, oh, okay. And I will be reading or trying, I think I will try her second book. Her second book is going to be coming out soon, which is a similar vibe. I think it's a demon who falls in love with a human, and it's like a similar thing. I'm curious to see if that's going to be better or kind of the same. It's probably going to be the same, but I will read it anyway, because I think at the end of the day it was an enjoyable read. It was so easy to read and kind of took me out of anything else that I was going through. I think I was entering into a reading slump at some point, and this was enjoyable during that time. So okay, next up I read The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This one I tabbed a little. I haven't tabbed all of them just simply because I think some of these books there was nothing worth tabbing, in my opinion. I've got to the point where I'm going to be tabbing books when it makes sense for me, or I feel like you know, I probably most likely will reread this book, so I want to tab it. And some of the tabbing I actually have underlined parts that I've enjoyed, and other parts I've just done the actual tabs themselves and not written in the book. I kind of just play it by ear and see. I did start tabbing not Magpie, although I did tab Magpie quite a lot, but Yellowface I started tabbing, and then I was, you know, like midway through the book, and I was like, I probably don't need to tab this anymore, because I knew already I kind of wasn't going to give it a high rating. So it just kind of is random, I think, my tabbing experience. But anyway, The Dead Romantics. This is a nice romance book. I think I ended up giving this a 3.5, although I think in my vlog where I can't remember which vlog it was, maybe my 24-hour reading vlog, I think I gave it a 3, but on my spreadsheet it's a 3.5, so whatever. I liked it. It was predictable. I will say it's predictable. There is a movie out there that in reverse has sort of the same premise, so if you know what I'm talking about, then you know. Otherwise, go into it and just enjoy the experience. There's a little bit of supernatural elements to it. Obviously it's called The Dead Romantics, so you know that kind of makes sense. But if you don't care and you can get into that story without, you know, thinking, well, this is not realistic, blah blah blah, if you're able to just get past that, it is fine. But I think ultimately what let it down was I think there was too much in the story about, so basically we follow Florence, right, and her father passes away at the beginning of the book, so she goes to visit her family, and I think there was a lot about that in the book and not as much of the romance that I really wanted. Like the parts that I tabbed were like in the middle, and they were sweet romantic moments, but I didn't have enough of it. I think that was the problem. I didn't have enough of that tension. I didn't have enough of those sweet moments like that. I think it was glossed over way too much, and I think for a romance book there wasn't enough of it in there, and then until like the end, and I didn't even tab the ending or like the last third of the book, because I was like, by that point I kind of was like, I don't know, and I had already sort of predicted what was going to happen in the book as well. As I said, I think it is predictable. So it was just like a mediocre one, but I did give it higher than a 3, a 3.5. It's definitely not a 4 in my opinion. It's probably closer to a 2.5, if that makes sense. 2.5, no, a 3.25. All right, and then I read Rhythm, Chord, and Mannequin by Mariana Zapata. I read this super fast. It's not a huge book. I didn't tab this one. It's something that I read and I got like halfway through and I was like, oh, fine, I'll just finish it. And I read it, I think, in 1 or 2 sittings. It's a good book, I think, for maybe a slightly younger person than I am. As someone who is in her early 30s, I feel like this is aimed probably for someone in their mid-20s, because everybody in this book is about 26, 27, and I think the way that they speak to each other, and I said this in one of my vlogs, but I didn't find it realistic for their age. Like when I was 27, 26, I didn't know anybody who spoke like this with their friends. It was very high school-y type of language and sort of camaraderie, and so I didn't really enjoy that. But basically we follow Gabby, and she has a twin brother, and he's in a band, and they have a band that they're headlining, and they go on a tour bus, and that's basically the whole book. And she falls in love with the other band's lead singer, and yeah, there's a romance. I think ultimately the ending of this was too sugar-coated. It was too like sweet, and I wanted a little bit more like realism in there. It ended with basically happily ever after type vibe, and I just found it a little too sickly sweet in that respect. So I ended up giving it a 3.5. Alright, next up, we're going into my 4s. I have a couple of 4s. So I read Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukugawa. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering that name. I do apologize. I thought this was a very cute read. It's like only 200 pages, something like that, yeah. I thought it would be a lot cozier than it was. It ended up having a lot of sadness to it. It was a lot about isolation, loneliness, disparity, some comments about unaliving and things like that. And it's more about like a story of, what's his name? Sentara. He works in a confectionery place, and this very old lady who has disfigured like hands and everything, they talk about this all the time, wants a job, and he's like, well, you're too old and look at you, you can't do anything. But then that he slowly grows to appreciate her and really enjoy her company and enjoy working with her, and she shows him how to make sweet bean paste, which he was using from a pot. He wasn't making from scratch because he couldn't do it, and she taught him the ways to look into the world himself. And I'm not explaining this properly, but there is like the story goes in a way that I wasn't expecting, because in the back of the book it says she's like hiding a dark secret, and her dark secret is that when she was a girl she had leprosy, and like her and a lot of other people were segregated from everybody, society, and they were put into their own village because of fear that they would, you know, end up contaminating everybody and giving everybody leprosy. And even at the point that she was, because I think she went when she was a child, and even at the point when she was cured of it, which was maybe early 20s, maybe even before that, they still weren't allowed to leave that village. They were basically prisoners, and it was a whole community of people, and her hands basically were from leprosy. And so, you know, it's not something that she had control over, and so there's a lot of that in the book where you're not really expecting it. But it's, again, a lot of this sadness and the fact that her whole life she'd been locked away, and then finally, I think it was like 10 years previous to where we are in the book, they were finally allowed out. But there was still such a huge stigma of people who had leprosy, and people were still worried about catching it. They didn't really want them to leave. So, you know, people sneered at her and was like worried, and even the shop owner, his boss, was like, you have to fire her. She's gonna, you know, push away all our customers, which actually did end up happening. So I know that there's like kind of a little bit of a spoiler there, but I think the story is more about, it's like more about the characters themselves, let alone, there's not that much of a plot going on, and you wouldn't really expect it in a 200-page book anyway. But I think it was a sweet book because it was about humanity and, you know, loving one another and finding some relief to isolation and being lonely, and finding something that will make you keep going. So I thought it was a very sweet book and I gave it 4 stars. Alright, moving on, we've got Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is one of the books that I read most recently and I did enjoy this book. I think it's a silly book. At the end of the day, I don't think it's realistic. I went into it knowing that I didn't think it was going to be realistic and I just wanted to, you know, dive into something that might have been a little bit silly. It's like a thriller mystery. They all go to their grandmother's place that's on the Cornish seaside, isolated on a little cove, and when the tide is in they can't leave, basically, so it's on this own little island, and then slowly, one by one, you know, people keep dying, right? And it's like, what is going on? Now I will say that I did learn the twist. I mean, I did suspect the twist quite early on, but that didn't take away my enjoyment of the book. There were parts of the book that I thought didn't really need to be included. There was you go back and forth with her history. So Daisy Darker is like a 27-year-old or something like that, and she's the youngest of her 2 sisters. And there are tapes that they end up watching during their stay there, and they're just little home movies, and so once the tape plays you kind of get a flashback of that day or that moment. I think there were a little bit too much of it, to be honest. Some of them were fine, and some of them I felt like moved my understanding of the plot and like what was going on, and some of them I didn't really care about. So there's a little bit of that, and I think that ultimately was one of the reasons why I only gave it a 4 star as opposed to something higher, and also because I kind of figure out what was going on pretty early on. However, I still enjoyed it, so yeah, I gave it a 4 star. Alright, so next book I have is actually the Matthew McConaughey book, Green Lights. I just finished this last night. I did listen to a lot of this in one of my vlogs. I think it was trying to find a 5 star. No, not that one. I don't know. I can't remember which one it was. Oh no, like swapping my screen time or something like that. But anyway, I had like an hour left, so I just listened to it last night and I finished it. This I really enjoyed. I liked that I think I preferred it because I was able to listen to him and his voice and his diction and his enunciation, and just learn like what he was trying to say and everything that he was saying, because it came from him and obviously he wrote it in his story. I think had I actually read the book I probably wouldn't have felt the same experience, so I would recommend listening to it as opposed to reading it yourself. But obviously if you prefer reading it, that's absolutely fine. I ended up giving it a 4 star. I thought it was very interesting. There were parts of the book that I thought were a little bit self-indulgent, a little bit like, okay, let's get to the point, or okay, yeah, you said that. But there were other parts where I thought that he had some interesting stories, and I really liked his outlook on life and what he'd done and what he accomplished. I definitely enjoyed probably the middle part of the book more so than anything, and I think right at the end, like what I listened to last night probably wasn't all that interesting, because it's more like of his life in the last like 7 years of like, you know, the last few movies he's done, and more like a summary as opposed to like some story that he'd added on there. Definitely early part of his life and like the middle part, you know, there were like some silly little, you know, notes and comments and very interesting stories that he had gone through. So I ended up giving it a 4 star. I do think that, I think when I first spoke about it, I said, oh, well, I'm gonna give it a 5 star, but I think it did ultimately let me down slightly just for those reasons. So, but I did enjoy it, so I'm giving it a 4 star. All right, and then another audiobook that I listened to is The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. Now, I read this book a few weeks ago and it kind of destroyed me. It is a very heart-wrenching like book, and it was, you know, I think ultimately I was listening to a lot of samples on Audible, so I was trying to think, well, you know, I find it really hard to get into Audible books, like audio books or anything like that, because if the narrator is not good, I just can't listen to them, regardless if the story is good. But this was narrated by Art something, what's his name? Art Matica, I can't remember his name, but he has the most amazing voice. And so I listened to a sample and I was like, yes, I'm going to listen to this. If this is how the book is going to be, fine. And it's basically about Syrian refugees and what they go through, and particularly what he goes through and it is pretty like what he and his wife go through, and also like their son and what happened, and they're trying to get to London, and he, like, parts of the book he's already in London and he's talking about what happened, and the parts of the book you're seeing how they get there, and they end up in Istanbul, and then they go to Greece as well. There's like a whole mix of things that happen, and at the end of the day, I don't want to give away any spoilers because I think I gave away a lot of spoilers in my vlog. So this one, I gave it a 4-star. I didn't give it higher than a 4-star because I think there were parts of the book where I didn't feel as connected to it as I felt with other parts, and that might be because I listened to it and not necessarily read the book. I think I will pick up the actual book myself eventually because it is a book that I really enjoyed. It lingered in my brain, and I told my mother about it and she read it and she wept and cried too. So it's a very well written book. I think Christy Lefteri has definitely a talent in writing a certain style of book, and it's not the type of book that you can read and feel happy about. It does make you sad. It does. So there are some other books that she's read that that have on my wish list that I will eventually get to. But yeah, I read The Beekeeper of Aleppo and I thought it was excellent. I just didn't give it 5-star just simply because I just don't think that ultimately there were parts of it that I just didn't enjoy, but it might be because I listened to it. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'll have to reread it when I actually have the physical copy. All right, and then the last 2 books that I read, I ranked really high. So this one I gave a 4.5 star. I feel like ultimately I could give it a 5-star. I think it probably is a 5-star at this point, having read all of these other books. But I gave it a 4, and then I changed my mind, and I gave it a 4.5 earlier this month. And it is The 7 Moons of Mali Almeida by Shihan Karunatilaka. Now this is a Sri Lankan author, and it was all about this guy in Mali Almeida, who in the late 80s and early 90s, what's going on in Sri Lanka basically. And it has obviously a lot of supernatural elements to it because basically he is murdered and he wakes up in the in-between, and he has 7 days to pass through to the light. And you know, if he doesn't, then he'll get stuck in the in-between, and during those 7 days or the 7 moons, he's trying to figure out what happened because he can't remember how he died, who killed him, why, and so on. So you're learning with him what's going on. I would say this is definitely a political book. It's definitely historical fiction with political themes and supernatural themes. So there is a lot in this book. I tabbed it a whole lot because I will preface this. This is a hard book to read. It is very hard. Not only does it jump around quite a lot, sometimes you're in the in-between with Mali, sometimes you're in the past, sometimes you're watching the present. So one of the skills that you can do while you're in between is you can float or jump on different winds, and depending on where you want to go or where the wind takes you, you can go see sometime in your past or sometime in the present if your name is being spoken about or you were there or something that has a connection to you. You can't just decide to go wherever you want that you've never been before, but you can obviously go to see your loved ones and things like that. So a lot of the book, he is jumping between the different winds and he is trying to figure out what happened. We're seeing things in the past of what happened as well to the lead up of his death, and also the aftermath with his 2 roommates slash sort of girlfriend boyfriend, and also all of the political stuff that's going on as well. So he was a war photographer, so he did have a lot of images of the war and what was going on, and some of the images were images that certain political figures wouldn't want anyone else to see. So there's a lot of themes in this book. Not only that, he also likes to gamble, and he also is a closet gay. And obviously, they were very frowned upon, especially the gay part, especially in the time that this book is also written as well. So, you know, there is a lot going on with this book. And so it does take you it took me a long time to read the book, but honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think ultimately I gave it a 4-star because I didn't enjoy the ending. The last chapter, I thought let it down. But after a few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about the book and thinking about everything that had happened, everything that I'd read, and it just made me think about everything. I ended up giving it a 4.5. I think ultimately it's probably a 5-star. I think, you know, looking at this one and the one book that I gave a 5-star this month, I think I'm probably going to change my rating to a 5-star. I think I have to, because I've seen the caliber of books that I've read so far, and this is above them for sure. I can understand how people give up on this book or probably give it a lower rating, because a lot of the themes and a lot of the things that are written probably goes over your head, or you're just not in the mood to read such a political driven, heavy book, because laced in with all of that, there's all the supernatural elements of it. Sometimes you're in the in-between and you have this woman who's chasing him, trying to get him to the light, and then you have this dark figure who is like, no, stay in the in-between, we're gonna start a revolution, you know, and he's like this evil darkness. And you know, then there's like there's some other demons as well. There is a lot in this book, I will tell you, but I wouldn't say it's not a fantasy book at all. It's just a very, very, very interesting read. And yeah, I've decided right now I'm gonna give it a 5-star. I've changed my mind. I don't think a 4.5 is right for this book, just because of everything I've said. I just think it is a really good book. But I will also say not a lot of people are going to enjoy this book. I think it won the Booker Prize for 2022, and I can see why. I really can, but it's that type of book that you cannot skim read. You can't skip a paragraph. You gotta read everything, because you might miss something and then go back. So yeah, it took me a long time to read that book, but I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm giving it a 5-star. Alright, and last but not least is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Much lighter read. Anyone can read this book and probably enjoy it. I do see some people say that they didn't like this book. I haven't read that many sort of romance books, as you can see, and I think out of the ones that I've read this month, I liked this one the best. I gave it a 5-star, and I tabbed it a little. Now, the reason I gave this a 5-star, and I spoke about this in one of my other videos, I think the love story was really sweet, but I ultimately gave it a 5-star because I really enjoyed some of the sadness in it. There's a lot of sad notes to it, and like heart-wrenching, like, I don't know, feelings of not feeling good enough for one's family and things like that. And I think ultimately I really liked that part of the book. And I liked Charlie, who is our main love interest. I didn't so much love our main character, which is Nora, but I did like her dynamic with her sister and everything that went on with their mother, learning about all of that. I did enjoy the backstory, and usually with romance books, I don't care about the backstories. I just want the romance. With this one, I actually liked it. I thought it gave a lot of context to who she was and who her sister was, and there was like this whole subplot in the book about that, and honestly I really didn't mind that. Normally I think I wouldn't have liked that, but I actually did enjoy that in the book, and the romance was sweet. Charlie was really hunky, so yeah, I gave it a 5-star. I thought it was a nice, easy read, and enjoyable too. Yeah, those are all the books that I read this month. I'm sorry for such a long video, but I wanted to talk about some of them in more detail. Obviously, if you watch some of my vlogs, I do talk about them as and when I'm filming that, so you know, you will get my instant reaction to some of them. But yeah, I feel like, you know, 12 books is pretty good. I definitely was able to read more than I suspected. I did not read all of the books in my August TBR. There definitely were some books where I started, but I didn't end up like reading altogether. So we'll see if I just DNF them for now and I pick them up later, or what's gonna happen with that. I'm very glad that I didn't DNF any of these like midway point or anything like that. I mean, I really could have DNF'd The Secret Life of an Uncool Mom, because I don't think it deserves anyone's time to read that book. But I persevered. I was just like, fine, I'm just gonna read it, and it was like a nothing book. There was really nothing to say about that book. And I think the only one that I really regret not enjoying or has left a sour taste in my mouth is Yellowface, because I just wanted to like that book. And I still watch people rating it like a 4-star, and I'm like, oh, good for you, you know, you actually liked it. I'm jealous. I'm jealous that people like that book, because I did not like that book. So that's just a me thing. But anyway, yeah, that is my update for, you know, my August wrap up and everything I read. I'm excited for September. I already have my September TBR, and yeah, you'll have to wait and see what that is, but I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.